Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. The podcast for the leaders and entrepreneurs of today.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. Finish on. Let's go.
Great job, guys.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to a very special episode. It's episode 300 of the Today's Leader podcast. It's been an enormous privilege for me to bring you the Today's Leader podcast. Our journey has certainly not been simple. It certainly hasn't been a very smooth journey at all. We've been disjointed at times. We've meandered along the path. We've drifted from our path many times. But over the last probably 130 episodes, we've been very focused around the Today's Leader concept. And that is starting to be rewarded in greater listener numbers, which we are really excited about. Now, the journey started off on October 9, 2013, and our very first episode was called Our Comfort Zone is the Warden of Our Self-Imposed Prison. Now, if you want, go back and have a listen to that, because I guess you will see the vast journey that we've been on. I would have loved to have shared a snippet of that very first episode, but the sound quality, seriously, and especially the volume is really ordinary. So to me, it's a real indicator of the journey that we've actually gone on to get where we are today. That very first podcast episode had a 3-minute music intro. And yes, it was one of my most favourite songs of all time, The Living Kind by Ups and Downs. But I'm not sure if many people would have lasted that 3 minutes to hear me speak. It was a full 4 minutes in before you actually heard me start talking. And then my first words on that episode was about the song that people just heard. So I really took that concept of Coach Curl radio, or what I knew of radio, into that very first episode and into the formation of what we now know as the Today's Leader podcast. Now, the lessons that I've learned since then have been amazing. We started out on Blog Talk Radio and we moved over to Spreaker as our podcast platform. Spreaker provided, even though I think they're the same company as Blog Talk Radio, they provided greater opportunities, and we now run a number of different podcasts out of that particular platform. In the early days, we recorded on whatever we could, whether it was a phone or whether it was a laptop, or we ultimately bought some microphones. We started to get a little bit more dedicated equipment. Our first and most of our podcasts, to be honest, have been recorded via either Skype or Zoom, but we've now moved over to the amazing Riverside Plum FM platform, which is what I'm actually using today. Even though I'll be using, I don't have a guest on today's show, we'll be utilising that to record the screen sharing of some of the snippets of my top 10 personal growth learnings. So around the late hundreds, or just before 200 episode, we shifted from the Coach Curl podcast to the Today's Leader podcast. And initially we saw, well, it was a drop in our listeners, but over the last couple of months, our growth has been growing by 100% each month, which, no one can be unhappy with. While I've definitely learned about the ins and outs of podcasting and getting the quality to a standard that people can enjoy, my own personal growth journey has also been enhanced by some of the great leaders that I've been honoured to interview and showcase. And today, on episode 300, I'm going to share some of the best learnings that I've had. Now, there's no ranking in this. It's just simply in episode order. So let me get this started. In episode 193, I interviewed Catherine B. Roy. Now, Catherine's been recognised as one of the global top entrepreneurs. She's a business coach. She's built this amazing profile and a successful business with mindset and success coaching. She was our feature interview on 193. And as always, she just speaks with really deep insight into humans and the behaviours that we have. Now, the little snippet I'm going to share, we were speaking of feelings and emotions when Catherine shared this.
What's very important is what you actually mentioned. You mentioned feelings and emotions, and I make a huge distinction between those two terms. Feelings are pure, like love is a pure feeling, but emotions are processed through our mind. So those are feelings processed through our mind. And if our mind is toxic and infected by a high-level ego, it can be actually destructive.
Yeah.
It can, create anger and dissatisfaction or something like that through our mindset. And that's like putting, a seed into unhealthy ground. That plant is not going to be healthy. But if you put a seed in healthy ground, in the healthy mindset, which has a balance between ego, heart, and mind, then actually you might succeed. So, if we look back into history, some of the greatest leaders were very egocentric, but that was all very destructive for everyone else around. Now I also believe there are people who can lead, not in the political sense, but someone like Tony Robbins or Oprah or something like that, who actually are not leading from the spot of ego.
Exactly. That was Catherine B. Roy. And one of the big learning there for me, and I suppose a reaffirmation of many of the stuff that I talk about, is that we can create our own toxic environment with the way that we think and the way that we believe. So, and to see that and to hear the analogy of, putting plants into, fertile soil or, pretty ordinary soil. And the same thing happens with us as human beings. So that was an amazing insight and a real acknowledgement there of our own toxic environment. Now, that was closely followed in episode 196 by a gentleman called Ryan Gottfredson. Now, Ryan's an associate professor and just an amazing man. He has written a book. It's one of the best-selling books called Success Mindsets, the Key to Unlocking Greater Success in Life, Work and Leadership. And one of the things that, this statement that he shares, and I've just got to tee it up, this statement that he shares is just phenomenal, what he talks about here.
And failing or losing at times.
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to give you 4 different desires, Tony, and you tell me if society says that these are good desires to have.
Yep.
Okay. So there's the desire to look good, the desire to be right, the desire to avoid problems, and the desire to get ahead.
I reckon society would say that all of them are good things.
Right? So this is the pressure that we face. We face the pressure to look good, be right, avoid problems, and get ahead. And this is justifiable because who wants to look bad, be wrong, have problems, and get passed up?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
But the problem with these desires is when we have these desires of looking good, being right, avoiding problems, and getting ahead, where's our focus? The focus is on ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we're a leader and we're focused on ourselves, what are we not focused on? Everybody else and the organization, right? Yeah. So this is where leaders, they feel very justified in having these desires, but these desires handicap them towards the positive impact that they can have. And I think it's not because they're bad leaders or they want bad things. It's because I think most of the time they don't understand that there's better desires to have that aren't socially incentivized. Yeah. So, for example, instead of a desire to look good, we should have a desire to learn and grow. So when we have a desire to learn and grow, what that means is that at times we're going to have to be willing to fail and look bad.
Yep.
Because that's the only way or the best way to learn and grow is actually through failure.
Yeah.
So we have to, not that we're running towards failure, we just have to be okay with failure. Instead of wanting to be right, we should want to find truth and think optimal, which means at times we're going to have to admit that we have been wrong, which is not something we're socially incentivized to do.
Incredibly challenging for a lot of people, I know.
So hopefully if we can just awaken people from shifting from these negative desires, although justified, they're negative desires, to the more positive desires of looking good. Learning and growing, thinking optimally and finding truth, reaching goals and lifting others.
Yeah.
Then we're setting ourselves up to have, these are associated with the 4 positive mindsets.
Yeah.
Of growth, open, promotion, and outward mindsets. And as we make shifts from the negative desires and mindsets, which is self-protection mode, we shift over to what I call organization advance mode.
Organization advance mode, and so much more. I mean, there's so much there in for personal learning and for personal growth, just in that little 2-minute snippet from Ryan there. And Ryan uses the analogy of so many people are trying to succeed in the world. They've got one foot on the gas or accelerator, and we've got the other foot on the brake. And that's so relevant when you really dive into the concept of success mindsets, which is, of course, Ryan's work. So being able to learn and grow means that we're willing to fail and look bad, and we will look bad. It always reminds me of that famous saying, you can't lead a cavalry charge if you think you look silly on a horse. And one of the things that are holding many people back is that whole concept that they're trying to move forward with good intention, but along the journey, we're holding ourselves back by something else that we may not necessarily be understanding of. So once again, that was an amazing conversation, and I really thank Ryan Gottfredson for really starting to raise the bar of some of the guests, I guess, that we were having here on the Today's Leader. Episode 214 was one of my favourites because this gentleman is just full on. Speaking with Mack Story, he's the man behind the Blue Collar Leadership brand and success roller coaster that is that brand. Compelling episode. Mack speaks 2 languages, he says, English and country, so he's a good old American country boy. But he's a man passionate to his cause of furthering the skills of blue-collar workers and leaders globally. Now, the biggest personal learning, so Mack spoke so much gold in this episode 214, so much gold about leadership, so much gold about frontline leadership. But from a personal aspect, you can't beat this.
I need all the help I can get to influence all these people out there, and I just have to model it. I tell people, Ria and I were speaking to a bunch of young sex trafficking victims who had been rescued, and Ria had brought me in. She speaks to them quite often, but she brought me in to share my transformation story. So I shared, how I had transformed, and my anger was the other big piece of that. This kind of a 3-legged thing there that I had to really work on, and I become a Christian in 2012. But that was after I quit drinking and after I quit using profanity. So she asked me, though, the cool question. Now I share it from the stage like I'm sharing with you guys here on your podcast today. She asked me at the end, she raised her hand, and she said, Mack, do you ever want to go back? And what she meant was go back to being the way I used to be, because, she's trying to have a better life, because a lot of those young ladies, besides being victims of sex trafficking, they're in drugs and alcohol and other things that they want to get away from, and they were in a home where they're trying to help them get away from it. And she asked me, do you ever want to go back? I said, every day I want to go back. And they were like, you could see on their face, they couldn't believe that wasn't the answer they expected. Yeah. And so then I had to explain it to them, right? I do that. I set them up, and then I explain it. And I get them to thinking, get them to listening is what I get them to do. So I said, every day I want to go back. I said, I bet you're wondering why. She's like, yeah, why? I said, because that's who I am without any effort. I'm that guy. I can let profanity spew out of my mouth. I was in the Marine Corps in the infantry. So two things those guys are good at is profanity, actually anger and aggression, and drinking alcohol. Not all of them, but a lot of them. That's just the way we were. And so I had to unlearn all that. But I tell them that's and it's the truth. That's who I am naturally. Every day It's why I'm so passionate about this, Tony, because I know it's a choice. And I know there are other people who are struggling, and they're struggling because of their character. That's the reason they can't get ahead. They may blame a million other things, but at the end of the day, if we can't get where, Henry Cloud, my favorite definition of character is from Henry Cloud, it's the ability to meet the demands of reality. It's that simple. And he defines integrity as the courage to meet the demands of reality.
I know it's a choice. What an amazing little snippet that is from Mac. That's me with no effort. I'm that guy. And once again, just cementing the fact that being your best is not something that's going to come easy. It's not something that's going to come naturally. It requires some discipline. It requires some effort. It requires some real skin in the game. And Mac shares that story. He would go back to being who he was every single day. There's not a day goes by where he's not thinking about that, because that's him of least effort. That's him with no effort. So, take that on board for whoever's listening to this. I mean, the reality is it's so easy to reach for that chocolate bar. It's so easy to reach for that beer. It's so easy to do so many things that aren't necessarily going to help you get to where you want to be by being the best that you can be. It actually requires discipline. It actually requires a choice. And Max shares that so well. So, episode 217, I interviewed Mac's wife, Ria, and no matter which way you look at this, Ria has just such a powerful story to tell. She rebuilt her life after leaving home without much more than just a duffel bag with some clothes, after years of sexual abuse perpetrated by those who were supposed to protect her. She not only escaped and survived the sexual abuse, but has now grown into an influential leader and role model for so many others. And once again, this was an inspiring episode, but I start this little bit of a snippet with a quote from Ria's TED Talk. The other thing that really caught my eye during your TED Talk, or caught my ear, I should say, was resilience is rising from the ashes from what happens to us in life, and for us burning brighter because of the flames. Now, forgive me for saying this, but Katy Perry needs to write a song about that. So that is such a powerful quote. So talk me through where that came from, because that's got power in it.
I like to use that analogy because my story is unfortunately not that uncommon, but it's not everybody's story, and I recognize that. But every single one of us as humans, as leaders, go through challenges and face adversity and obstacles. It's a fact. It's just life that we're going to go through hardship and face adversity. And that absolutely affects us, and it influences us. I don't want to discount that, because when you're going through something, it's tough. It's tough to go through that and recognize that it's hard, it's difficult. But the beautiful thing is that how it influences us is up to us. In taking my story and acknowledging it and owning it, it doesn't own me any longer. And there's no doubt I'm a different person today because of what I went through. I mean, that absolutely has influenced me in so many ways. But in 2013, I made the decision that it was going to refine me and not define me. And I think that's important, because adversity shapes us and influences us, and it affects us. But it's up to us to say, you know what, because of what happened, I'm stronger, I'm better, I've learned something. And that's where we burn brighter.
That's when we burn brighter because of it. I mean, so true. And once again, today, so many people are stuck in the past, where even some people are stuck in a past that they personally haven't experienced. My God, what's going on here? It's the resilience and the ability for us to utilize our past experiences, our past learnings as a human species that is going to allow us to build a resilient future. So the whole world should take notice of that particular little segment, and of Ria Story in particular, because once again, that's just powerful. Utilizing our past pain, our past experiences to deliver and refine us into better people is something that is just so relevant for so many people. So In episode 229, I spoke to an amazing gentleman called Michael Arterberry, and he has a powerful story, Overcoming adversity was again the main thrust of the conversation with Michael. He's a powerful, driven by purpose gentleman. He had, in his youth, a very positive role model who mentored him, and he has taken that on and is paying that forward with the work that he does with the youth of where he works. So he shared so many stories, including this one.
And I pull them back out into, everything I do is in a circle.
Yeah.
So I pull them back out in the circle, and then I walk them through a story, Tony. And I talk to them about how when my daughter was 4 years old, my wife brought her down to my man cave. I'm watching football, and she comes in. She's about to go to bed. She comes, she gets on my lap. I play with her, and then she walks back over to my wife. And right before my wife picks her up, I say, "Good night, beautiful." And she looks at my wife, and she does a happy dance. And I'm like, wow. She walks away, but then because of the work I do, and I'm telling them this story, I think about it. I said, what if I called her ugly? What if when she came downstairs, I said, "Hey, didn't I tell you about bringing her downstairs? I don't want you to bring her downstairs when I watch football." And I walked them through the fact that if I did that to her at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I bring it up to the age group that I have sitting with me. And once I tell them that, I say, what do you think she looks like? And then the teenagers will say, she's dark. She has low self-esteem. I talk about a relationship with boys. How is it? They say it's probably bad because you're a man, you're a boy. Or she loves boys too much because she wants the attention from the boys that, you know what I'm saying, she doesn't get from a father. But what I'm trying to say is, with all that going on, I asked them the question, who do you think's driving a car? And they say, you are, her father. And I explained to them that I will drive her car. She can get married and have a husband. I'm still driving a car.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? She can get married, have a husband and a child. I still drive a car. And what I teach them is that until you take back your keys, or until she takes back her keys, I'll drive her car for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
And so be the driver of your car is a concept that I push because I want them to understand the words that are said to you, the negative thoughts that you may have about yourself. You have control of keeping a thought or kicking it out your head, because if it plants itself, it germinates and it can grow just like a seed.
Wow, once again, just be the driver of the vehicle. Don't be the passenger. Take control of your car. Don't let anyone else. A really important message there from Michael Arterberry. So that was back in episode 229. He shared so many fantastic stories. That was just one of them. So if you haven't heard of that episode, go back and have a listen because it's an absolute cracker. In episode 232, I spoke with Dirk van Reenan. Now, Dirk is an entrepreneur out of Houston, Texas. He came up, like one of the really key lines that he shared during our podcast interview was the team or the business with the best team will win. Unequivocal, will win. And this was something that I really just took on board, because so often we try and be coy with this, as people that work with leadership teams and trying to build great teams. Often we just get too coy. Oh yeah, it might, it may win, it could win, it should win. So, but Dirk was unequivocal.
Because of that tendency, I tend to make a lot.
Dirk was, and there he was, just as I was teeing it up. But he was unequivocal. The business with the best team will win. He's a growth consultant, expert in human and team systems. He shared his journey. He was very open and honest and forthright with that journey. Shared many aspects of failure. And one of the truly amazing things he said is in relation to failure.
I tend to move very fast. So because of that tendency, I tend to make a lot more mistakes than a lot of other people. However, one thing that I've learned to do really well is learn from my mistakes. So I think like that's something I always carry with myself is I don't have an adversity to failure, right? So, and I think like that's something that's really important for especially entrepreneurs, that so many people want to play it safe and they want the guarantees and they're afraid to fail. And so what they do is they play it safe, and that ultimately causes them to fail at a higher level, right? So I've always kind of taken the approach of, it's one thing that gave me took a lot of pressure off my shoulders is, and this is after my first business failed, because it was a bad failure, but I realized this thing. I said, look, if I never give up, I will never ultimately fail, right? The only way that I ultimately fail is if I give up. So when I adopted that belief, it really helped me navigate failure. And when I look at failures today is I love it when my team fails, when they make mistakes and they do something wrong, or we miss something, or whatever it is, we miss the mark on something. Because for us, it's a learning opportunity, and it's what can we learn about what went wrong, and how can we make sure that have more awareness next time, and that we have more influence on the decision making going into whatever we're going to do next. So, for us, failure is actually one of those things, and Gary Keller says this all the time. He said, fail fast, fail often, and fail forward. Meaning that there's kind of this thought process of, you don't succeed your way to success, you actually fail your way to success.
Yeah. You don't succeed your way to success, you fail your way to success. How true and relevant. And hopefully you're starting to see some real alignment in between some of our speakers. Dirk was talking about people that were scared to fail, which is very much in line with the prevention mindset that Ryan spoke about, Ryan Gottfredson, and is an expert in. So you're starting to see some real alignment in between what some of the experts are sharing from their perspective in and around being a leader for today. So if I never give up, I will never truly fail. And once again, I just love that. You don't succeed your way to success, you fail your way to success. So once again, there's some real common language being used by some of our experts, but they're just, as I said, I really love doing the Today's Leader podcast because I learn from every person that I speak with, and it helps me be a better leader, a better person, and hopefully a better host of this particular podcast. In episode 234, I spoke to our first and so far our only Scottish expert, and Joseph Trodden, who works with entrepreneurs in Edinburgh and Scotland in relation to what he calls the inflection point. Now, he has a very specific customer that he speaks with, and once again, here he speaks to the mindset of his ideal client.
You need to do in that early stage. So for me, it's about the mindset thing. And what will happen if you have too much of a structured and planning mindset is you'll sit and create the perfect spreadsheets or whatever, this what you think is a perfect plan. Then you'll be too frightened to go and do anything with it, because if it's wrong, then it'll crush your identity as somebody who gets things right. It's really hard. I'm not saying you can't do it if you're a different mindset type, but you need to be aware of just how painful that journey is going to be for somebody who thinks in that way. What I mean by that is, if you take the P, failure is just like, I don't care, like next thing. If you take a J, they're going crushed. That plan was perfect, and now it's not working, and now I need to deal with the emotional sort of hangover from that. So you may well be able to deal with it, but for me, it is about the cognitive style.
So he is very definite in it. It's a certain customer that he works with, and they fit a certain personality profile on the Myers-Briggs. So really clear around who it is that he can best serve and who it is that they can best work with. And so often I hear from many professionals and many consultants that they don't map out exactly who their best customer or their best client is. And often this backfires and causes it causes pain. It just causes huge amounts of pain. So the real learning there from Joseph was about being really clear about who it is that you can help and who it is that you support and provide support to. Because then you're in the best place to succeed because you know exactly how to work with that particular client, the problem that you're solving. In episode 249, I spoke to the amazing, the incredible Jen Thornton. Now, Jen is just a fantastic... Her story, once again, just blew me away. She went from like the picture-perfect, Instagram-perfect career into trading all that in and going out on herself. Now, she's definitely one also to follow because she provides great content in what it is that she does. And she recently provided a series called The Leading Edge, which was free to everyone in her contact or into her network. So it's important, once again, to have the right people around you. And I think Jen is definitely one of those. Now, here, Jen provides me an answer when we were talking about recruiting and developing the right team.
I think they go hand in hand. You have to, and I think the thing that's missing from that is what's the right work for that job.
Yeah.
And so really aligning the work and understanding what job needs to be out there and what will that job do. One of the things I find a lot of organizations doing is they're looking for unicorns. And so they have this job description that's really 3 completely different jobs and different skill sets. And then they're surprised everyone they hire fails. I'm like, I don't know why we're surprised here because you can't, like, they're completely different skill sets. And so the first thing is getting crystal clear on the work and how might it get done and who needs to do it. Then really good hiring decisions. Then how do we onboard that person, make them feel part of that organization? Then how do we develop them for the future?
Excellent. How do we develop them for the future? How do we get crystal clear on the roles and the clarity? So once again, just a huge learning for a lot of businesses out there because I just think that that's a part that we sometimes miss. So Bo Brabo episode, Robert Bo Brabo, From the Military to the White House was the title of episode 253. Once again, outstanding. He shared his insight in leadership, and he's had leadership in the military, he had leadership in the White House in people operations, and now he works with corporates and helps them utilize values-based leadership to create and build best leaders. And in our conversation, there was a period where we were talking about values-based leadership.
It all came about when I got the idea to write the book and have that subtitle. You know, it's more than just my story. It's taking my story and applying it to that theme, which you mentioned, leading organizations to values-based results. And I had the greatest example I could think of, which was the United States Army.
Yeah.
An organization that goes back to the 1700s, and we had, and they still do, very defined values and what all the behaviors around those values really mean and what they are. And I decided that when I got out into corporate America and went through some different companies and the values just kind of seem to be loose, they're not defined, who knows what they are, we just kind of go about our business every day. I was just thinking that this is a real opportunity to take everything that I had learned, witnessed, developed, and the way I perform my own leadership in accordance with a very strong set of organizational values like the Army values, and how a company could take those values, and if they had no others, Tony, here, you can use the Army values. You can take these. Here's what they are. Here's how they're defined.
Yeah.
And see how those might fit your organization, just to get an idea, right, of what does this really mean.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's how I got into all of that. Because I think soldiers, we lived it. Yeah. We lived those values, breathed them every day: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. Those are the 7 Army values.
Yeah.
And you could apply that to life.
you can apply that to life. Now, the importance of defining values for your organization is pretty crystal clear. It's one of the first things that I do when I'm working with businesses, looking at their culture, looking at their people. When I'm working with a startup, it's one of the first things that we discuss. What are the values of the organization? And it's not just about having those values sitting on a wall to make us feel good. It's actually values that we can live and define our own behaviours that we want to see from our team as we grow. So episode 253 with Brabo was a real eye-opener for those people, and it really highlights the benefit that organisations can truly have when they are very crystal clear, once again, around their values. Now, the last one that I'm going to share today, as I said, all of my guests have been absolutely amazing. For the 300th episode, I really wanted to try and work through what were some of the real insightful things that I've been able to implement and put into my life, into my business. And I think the 10 that you've heard today have been those ones that have really made an impact on me and created some change or some a shift in some of the stuff that I do. So the last one came from Randy Herbertson. Now, this is a recent episode 295. He's a recognized brand strategist. So this is a creative dude. This is a creative director. He's got 25 years of marketing and innovation experience, and, you know, a fascinating conversation, because during COVID he created this blog called My Moving Forward, and some of the stuff and just what he puts on that blog is just good. It's just good, honest, independent words, 2 sentences type things. It's more of a brain snippet more so than, you know, a long-winded 300, 600 word blog post. And that's why this is just incredibly inspiring what Randy has done with that particular project that he put together while they were in lockdown with COVID. But we were speaking about inspiration.
It's a really good question, and I think I would honestly say that I don't have one.
Okay.
You know, because honestly, I'm inspired. You know, frankly, I'm inspired more by actions than individuals. In other words, that there's something someone will do that I may not even would say normally would be my mentor, but I'm inspired by that particular action and what they do. And so I think that's the way I kind of like to lead my life. I mean, even people that, frankly, there are certainly people that don't inspire me for broader reasons, but there are some that do based on individual things that they do. And, you know, honestly, I will tell you that I certainly have had my own business mentors. There's a couple of people that have carried with me my entire career that I have regular follow-ups with, that now are much easier on Zoom than trying to get together. But honestly, again, I look for inspiration, you know, from lots of places. And the other thing too, very clearly, I would say very without any abashed, I'm a staunch independent. So I find my inspirations on all walks of life, you know, and that's the other thing I find relatively freeing is I don't say, oh, I'm a progressive, so I only can be inspired by progressive people, or I'm a conservative, only inspired by conservative people, because I find individual actions by lots of people to be inspiring and worth carrying forward.
And there we go. That was the final little snippet of the 10 top learnings that I've had. And once again, that's just inspired by individual actions. Thank you very much, Randy Herbertson. I love the concept of staunch independence, but he's also a free and a deep thinker. So there's so much to take from that. Don't just define yourself by aligning yourself with one methodology of thinking or one political message or one belief. It's just be independent, do your research, find out what is happening in the world and really understand that from your own concepts, because from your own standpoint, I guess, because that is when you can truly add value, not just to you, but also to the world in which we live. So I hope that you have enjoyed this particular podcast episode. This is episode 300. I've certainly enjoyed bringing you today, just doing the research again and just going back over all those episodes that we had. has made me a better person just in the last couple of days while I've been doing that. So I've enjoyed putting together the podcast episode today. I know that there's so many more to come. We as I said, we don't do this for any sort of monetary gain. If we were doing that, we would have quit after about episode 25, in all honesty. We do it because of the value that we know that we can bring to the world, the value of the experts that, now pretty much find us out. So that's always a positive thing, that people are looking to approach us to being on the podcast. So if you do know of any guests that you'd love us to contact or love us to have a chat to, please let us know. We do get those coming through on a fairly regular basis. So episode 300, the Today's Leader podcast. Thank you very much for being a listener, a supporter, a subscriber, or even if today's your very first episode, thanks for joining us. I hope that you've taken something away that can help you become the leader you need to be today. We will see you again all very, very soon as we continue to build the legacy for the leaders of today. I'll see you next time.